Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. Today we're going to recap yesterday's baseball games, look ahead to tonight's slate, go over tonight's WNBA Game 5s. The winners of tonight's two games go to the WNBA Finals, so I'll give you my picks for that. Go over some NFL cuts that I did not discuss on the previous podcast, so I'll do my NHL radio announcer rankings. I'll also be talking about college football and do guess the lines for week 2 and do my power rankings, and I'll also go over the AP poll that just came out today. And let's get going. Baseball. The Red Sox defeated the Braves 8-2 as they improve to a major league best. 95-44, Atlanta drops to 76-61. Brandon Workman improves to 3-0. Touki Toussaint drops to 1-1. The Nationals defeated the Cardinals 4-3 in 10 innings on a walk-off sac fly by Bryce Harper after tying the game in the bottom of the ninth with a 2-run shot. The Nats improved to 69-69. The Cards dropped to 76-62. Greg Holland improves to 2-2. Chasen Shreve drops to 1-1 as a Cardinal. The Marlins defeated the Phillies 3-1 as they improved to 55-83. Philly drops to 72-65. Jose Arena improves to 5-12. Vince Velasquez drops to 9-10. Drew Steckenrider gets his third save of the year. The Pirates defeated the Reds 5-1 as they improved to 67-71. The Reds dropped to 59-79. Trevor Williams improves to 12-9. Matt Harvey drops to 6-8. The White Sox defeated the Tigers 4-2 as they improved to 56-82. Detroit drops to 55-83. Jace Fry improves to 2-2. Shane Green drops to 2-6. Walk-off homer by Matt Davidson won it for the White Sox. The Brewers defeated the Cubs 4-3 on a walk-off fielder's choice by Christian Yelich as they improved to 78-61. The Cubs dropped to 81-56. Jared Jeffries improves to 8-1. Steve Chizik drops to 4-3. The Astros defeated the Twins 4-1 as they improved to 85-53. Minnesota drops to 63-74. Dallas Keuchel improves to 11-10. Kyle Gibson drops to 7-12. Brad Peacock gets his third save of the season. The Rockies defeated the Giants 9-8 as they improved to 75-62. The Giants dropped to 68-71. Sang-Hwan Oh improves to 2-0 as a Rocky. Tony Watson drops to 4-6. Wade Davis gets his 38th save of the year. The A's defeated the Yankees 6-3 as they improved to 83-56. The Yanks dropped to 86-52, so the A's fall back in the loss column of the Yankees in the wild card now. Trevor Cahill improves to 6-3. CC Sabathia drops to 7-6. Blake Trinan gets his 36th save of the season. The Royals defeated the Indians 5-1 as they improved to 46-91. The Indians dropped to 77-60. Jacob Junis improves to 8-12. Adam Plutko drops to 4-5. Tim Hill gets his second save of the year. The Rays defeated the Blue Jays 7-1 as they improved to 74-63. Toronto drops to 62-75. Yanni Chirinos improves to 3-5. Marcus Stroman drops to 4-9. The Angels defeated the Rangers 3-1 as they improved to 67-71. The Rangers dropped to 60-78. Taylor Cole improves to 1-2. Zach Curtis drops to 0-1. Blake Parker gets his 14th save of the year. The Mets defeated the Dodgers 4-2 on a go-ahead pinch hit homer by Brandon Nimmo as they improved to 62-75. The Dodgers dropped to 75-63. Drew Smith improves to 1-0. Kenta Maeda drops to 8-9. Roberto Gesellman gets his 10th save of the year. The Padres defeated the Diamondbacks 6-2 as they improved to 55-85. Arizona drops to 74-64. Brian Mitchell improves to 1-3. Zach Godley drops to 14-8. The Mariners defeated the Orioles 2-1 as they improved to 77-61. Baltimore drops to 40-98. Erasmo Ramirez improves to 2-3. Josh Rogers drops to 1-1. Edwin Diaz gets his 52nd save of the year. Tonight's games: Cardinals Nationals, John Gann and Eric Feed. Reds Pirates, Cody Reed and Joe Musgrove. Rays Blue Jays, Ryan Stanek and Ryan Baroki. Royals Indians, Danny Duffy and Mike Clevenger, Phillies Marlins, Jake Arrieta and Trevor Richards, Red Sox Braves at 7:30, Rick Porcello and Sean Newcomb, 8 o'clock Tigers White Sox, Francisco Liriano and Lucas Giolito, Cubs Brewers, Mike Montgomery and Wade Miley, Twins Astros, Trevor May and Justin Verlander, Giants Rockies at 8:40, Derek Rodriguez and German Marquez, Padres Diamondbacks at 9:40, Joey Lucchesi and Robbie Ray, Orioles Mariners at 10 o'clock, Alex Cobb and Wade LeBlanc, and Mets Dodgers, Jason Vargas and Rich Hill. WNBA, 2 Game 5s tonight in the semifinals, and winners of these 2 games determine who will be in the WNBA Finals, which begins Thursday night. 8 o'clock, ESPN2, Mystics Dream. Helena Deladon is back for the Mystics. I think the series would have been over already if she didn't get hurt, and I think the Mystics will take Game 5 and advance to the WNBA Finals. Mercury Storm, 10 o'clock, ESPN2. Sue Bird broke her nose. She's able to play. So I really expect this to be a competitive game. Diana Taurasi has that amazing undefeated stat in her career in elimination games. I think that comes to an end tonight. I think the Storm are the better team. They'll win it on their home court. If Sue Bird didn't play, I'd pick the Mercury. But Sue Bird's playing. Give me the Storm at home to set up a final between Washington and Seattle. NFL cuts, a couple of them that I forgot to talk about yesterday, and some roster moves as well. I'll just go around the league a little bit. New England, Mike Gillespie, the running back, was cut. The Jets, they picked up former Giants backup quarterback Davis Webb, who was surprisingly cut by them. A lot of people thought he was their future, but don't forget Jerry Reese drafted him, not Dave Gettleman. So that was the key factor in them deciding to cut ties with Davis Webb, who has some upside. The Ravens pick RG3 over Lamar Jackson to be their backup quarterback to Joe Flacco. So RG3 is on a team this year. Another surprising cut was Cowboys kicker Dan Bailey, who I discussed on the podcast the other day. I thought that was the biggest surprise cut of them all. He's been such an accurate kicker. I know the Jets tried him out. I think the Giants should take a look at him. I think Los Angeles should take a look at him. There's a couple teams I think that can upgrade a kicker that can very well use Dan Bailey. I think San Diego. Oh, wait, I keep doing this. Los Angeles, in terms of the Chargers, are the best fit for Bailey because they're a contender and they've had special teams and kicking problems over the last couple seasons. Next, I'm going to do the NHL radio announcer rankings. This was a tough list to make. All these guys are talented at what they do. There's a couple guys on here that are backups and a couple guys on here that are TV announcers that switch over to radio on certain occasions. So let's go with this. 39 is a backup, Dan Dunleavy of the Buffalo Sabres. 38 is also a backup as well as number 37. 38 is Josh Getzoff of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and 37 is John Giannone of the New York Rangers. Giannone usually covers when Kenny Albert is on assignment or whatnot, and some other guys are on assignment, most notably Albert because he's their guy. Let's say Albert's doing football, Sam Rosen's doing football. Then Giannone would actually do TV instead of Rosen, but sometimes Giannone would fill in for Albert if there's some conflicts going on. 36 is Dan Diuva of the Vegas Golden Knights. This is only his second year because Vegas is a new franchise. 35 is Josh Bogart of the Stars. He's a new announcer, replacing the late Dave Strader, who would have been very, very high on this list if he had not passed away. I'm doing current announcers. And Bogard has certainly a big shoe to fill there in Dallas. 34 is Bob McElligott of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now we're getting into the guys that have been there a while. 33 is Bob Heathis of the Arizona Coyotes. 32 is Doug Plagans of the Florida Panthers. 31 is Connor McGahey of the Colorado Avalanche. He's a newer announcer. 30 is Nicolas St. Pierre, the French announcer from the Ottawa Senators. 29 is Dan Robertson of the Montreal Canadiens. He's their English announcer. 28 is Dean Brown of the Ottawa Senators. He's their English announcer. 27 is Matt Loughlin of the New Jersey Devils. He's pretty good. 26 is John Shorthouse of the Vancouver Canucks. He is their television announcer who comes in on radio every once in a while, as well as 25, who's also a television announcer for the Winnipeg Jets, and that's Dennis Bayak. 24 is Derek Wills of the Calgary Flames. 23 is Ken Kal of the Detroit Red Wings. 22 is Steve Carroll of the Anaheim Ducks. 21 is Don LaGreca, the number 2 guy on the Rangers radio whenever Kenny Albert has assignment. He's usually the guy that subs in. But every once in a while, you would have a John Ginone or a gentleman I'm going to get to in a couple seconds. Number 20 is Brendan Batchelor of the Vancouver Canucks. 19 is Paul Edmonds of the Winnipeg Jets. 18 is Jack Michaels of the Edmonton Oilers. 17 is Chris Kerber of the St. Louis Blues. 16 is Martin McGuire, the French announcer from the Montreal Canadiens. 15 is Sam Rosen. He's actually the television voice of the Rangers, but he occasionally does Rangers games on the radio whenever it's a nationally televised game. And let's say, for example, Kenny Albert calls the game on NBC instead of Doc Emmerich. And then that's when you would see Sam Rosen on the radio rather than Don LaGreca. And by the way, LaGreca is actually the pre-post game host for Rangers hockey on ESPN New York. So every once in a while I would see Rosen cover, or not cover, but call select games on the national side on the radio. And he's done a couple playoff games on the radio before too. 14 is Bob Kurtz of the Minnesota Wild. 13 is Pete Weber of the Nashville Predators. 12 is Rick Chatterett of the Buffalo Sabres. 11 is Tim Saunders of the Philadelphia Flyers. 10 is Chris King of the New York Islanders. 9 is Dan Ruzanovsky of the San Jose Sharks. 8 is Nick Nixon of the Los Angeles Kings. 7 is Kenny Albert of the New York Rangers. 6 is John Walton of the Washington Capitals. 5 is Mike Lang of the Pittsburgh Penguins. 4 is Joe Bowen of the Toronto Maple Leafs. 3 is Dave Mishkin of the Tampa Bay Lightning. 2 is Jude Sirott of the Boston Bruins. And number 1 is John Weideman of the Chicago Blackhawks. This was a difficult list to make. A lot of the guys that do the original 6 teams are pretty high on the list, and understandable because some of them have been there for a long time, like Sirott and Weideman. And those are the top 2 on my list. And as I said, for all the other announcer rankings I've done, I don't mean to insult anybody. This is just based on my opinion. Before I get into my college football power rankings, College Game Day for Week 2 will be held in College Station when Clemson takes on Texas A&M. I was surprised with that selection. Texas A&M is not a team that's expected to do much this season. Maybe they're just giving the Tigers some love against Jimbo Fisher. I guess that's like a bit of a storyline because of Fisher obviously coaching Florida State those past 8-9 years. So Fisher against Clemson's the storyline there. But I thought they would choose USC at Stanford, the 2 Pac-12 teams that meet up usually every year. And both of those teams are ranked, so I think Stanford was snubbed of a game day there. Unless they pick them in a couple weeks when they face Oregon. I believe that game's in Eugene, though, not at Stanford. So maybe that had something to do with it. We'll see how Stanford and Oregon do within the next couple weeks. Now I'm going to do my power rankings. And the thing with my college football power rankings that I'm going to do every week, there are 130 teams. I'm going to go from 130 to 1. And the top 25 on this list is typically how I see the AP poll playing out. And then after I do my power rankings, I'll look at the AP poll and go over the AP poll before I do guess the lines. 130's UTEP, they lost last week. 129 San Jose State, they lost last week. Those are two of the worst teams in the country. 128 Kent State, who also lost last week. They lost to Illinois. Unlike San Jose State and UTEP, those two teams have lost to FCS teams. Kent State at least lost to a Power 5 school, but a Power 5 school that is in a bit of a rebuild. 127 is Texas State. Same for them. They're a bad team. They just lost to a Power 5 program that's rebuilding. They're further along in a rebuild than Illinois. Let's be real. Rutgers, I think, is heading in the right direction long term with Chris Ash. 126 is Rice. This is a little bit of a harsh ranking for Rice, in my opinion, but that's reality. Rice isn't a good team. But I have to give Rice some credit. They won their game against the FCS opponent in week 0, and then they were competitive for a little while with Houston in week 1. So that's how they avoid the bottom 4. 125, New Mexico State. Very disappointed in them. I thought they'd be competitive with Wyoming and at least show some fight against Minnesota. They look like one of the worst teams in the country. 124 is Coastal Carolina. They lost at South Carolina. No big deal. Although I don't expect Coastal Carolina to be any good. 123 is Charlotte. They just beat an FCS school. They're not going to be good, though. 122 is Connecticut. They lost to UCF, who's ranked. And they're not supposed to be good either. 121 is East Carolina. They lost to an FCS school. I probably should have put UConn ahead of East Carolina just because of that, but no. I just still think UConn is terrible. And East Carolina lost a close game. That was a winnable game for them. UConn, that game wasn't winnable against their conference rival. 120 is Bowling Green. They're not supposed to be any good. They just lost to Oregon. Can't punish them for losing to Oregon. 119 South Alabama. They lost to Louisiana Tech. No shame in losing to Louisiana Tech, especially when you're a 10.5 point underdog. But they could have been more competitive in that game. But gotta give credit where credit's due. Louisiana Tech got the win. 118 is Louisiana Monroe. 117 Louisiana. 116 Georgia State. 115 Georgia Southern. All teams from the Sun Belt that did what they were expected to do. 114 is New Mexico, a team that could very well be the worst in the Mountain West this season, other than San Jose State. They actually came off a good, not a good win, but a win over an FCS team in Incarnate Word. You got to beat up on those FCS teams. Hey, maybe Bob Davies' team will be better than expected. There's a team in the Mountain West I'm eventually going to get to in these rankings. I'm probably going to end up ranking too high once the season's over. 113 Ball State. They just beat Central Connecticut. Don't want to overact to a team that I don't think is going to be good beating an FCS team, so it's similar to New Mexico in that standpoint. 112 Kansas. Terrible, terrible loss to Nichols in overtime. They might go winless this season unless they find a way to beat Central Michigan this week. 111 FIU. Wasn't expecting them to do much against Indiana. 110 Illinois. Beat Kent State. 1-0. Good for Lovie Smith. But I expect him to get fired anyway. 109 is UTSA. They lost to Arizona State, but I wasn't expecting them to win that game. 108 is Temple. This is pure punishment for losing at home to Villanova. I expected them to win that game. I'm very disappointed in the Temple Owls. That's a team that might be headed for a losing season now. 107 is Miami of Ohio. They lost to Marshall at home in the opener. They weren't favored in that game, but I picked them to win because they were home, and I didn't know what to expect from Marshall. So I guess you can say on paper that they weren't supposed to win that game because they were an underdog, but a small underdog. 106 is Old Dominion, a team that lost to Liberty, and not only lost to Liberty, but got blown out. I was very surprised by that outcome. I was suspicious by that line being so low. They were only favored by 6 points, and that line just kept going down, down, down. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, Liberty's new to the FCS, and no. They actually lost outright and lost very badly. 105 is Middle Tennessee. They lost to Vanderbilt as a 3-point dog. They got blown out, actually. Can't really fault them that much because Vandy, I think, is better than Middle. 104 is Western Kentucky. Can't fault them for losing to the number 4 team in the country. Number 103 is Air Force. They beat Stony Brook. Win is a win, and you take it, and Air Force had to win that game. 102 is Liberty. This is a team that's probably going to exceed expectations from what we see in early results. Great resounding win to start your FBS tenure. 101 is Akron. A team that didn't play because their game got canceled this weekend due to lightning. So there's nothing really to judge Akron on. 100 is Western Michigan. They lost to Syracuse on Friday night. That's okay. Yeah, you were home, but you were an underdog, and Syracuse had to win that game. 99 Central Michigan, a team that lost at Kentucky. No fault in losing to Kentucky. Kentucky's a better team than Central Michigan, so I can't fault them. 98 is UNLV. They lost to USC. No shame in losing to USC. 97 is Northern Illinois. They lost to Iowa. But I expected them to lose Iowa. Nothing really to judge them on or pinpoint at. 96 UAB, who beat Savannah State and did what they had to do. 95 is Southern Miss, who did what they had to do, which was blow out Jackson State. So good job, Southern Miss. 94 is a team I'm very disappointed in. The team I picked as my moneyline bet of the week, and that's the SMU Mustangs. They laid an egg against North Texas on the road. Anybody who had them ticketed for an under on the season should be happy right now because that team may not approach a bowl game. I was very disappointed in them. 93 is UMass, a team that many folks expected to improve this year. They got blown out at Boston College. Maybe Boston College is better than we think. Although nobody was really picking UMass to upset BC. 92 is a team I'm very disappointed in. That's the Colorado State Rams. They're 0-2. They lost in week 0 to Hawaii, and then they lose to Colorado in blowout fashion. This is a team I think folks overrated before the season. Now we look at it, maybe they won't even make a bowl. 91 is Louisiana Tech, who beat South Alabama on the road. Good win. 90 Oregon State. This might be a little high for Jonathan Smith's team, but even though they got blown out by 40-something points, they showed a little something in that game that makes me think that they could be competitive against some of the middle-tier teams in that conference, like in Arizona State. Or maybe in Arizona, the way they looked last week. I'll get in Arizona in a couple minutes. But hey, I can't really punish Oregon State. They actually showed some things, even though it was a blowout game. They scored on a good defense a lot. 31 points. I was actually impressed, even though they got blown out. 89 Marshall, they beat Miami of Ohio. Good win. 88 North Texas, very impressive win over SMU. They look like the team to beat in the Western Division, even though I picked another team to win that division. I picked UAB. 87 Tulsa, who defeated Central Arkansas, who is ranked 16th in the FCS. So they did what they had to do. Good job. 86 Tulane, they lost in overtime to Wake Forest. They were a dog in that game, so I can't fault them entirely for losing that game. They could have won that game and started 1-0, but hey, they showed some fight in that game, so I had to give Tulane a little bit of credit there. 85 Eastern Michigan did what they had to do. They defeated Monmouth. 84 is Nevada, who did what they had to do and destroyed Portland State. 83 is Utah State. A little high for a team that lost, but I saw some encouraging things in that game. They're a team that I think can make a big impact in the Mountain West Conference this year. They played Michigan State very, very well, and now expectations are going to be higher for Utah State. I'll get into another team from the group of 5 that deserves some love, even though they lost 2. 82 is Pitt. They did what they had to do and defeat Albany. Maybe Pitt will be better than I expected them to be. And a tough challenge awaits next Saturday night in Penn State. 81 is Rutgers, who did what they had to do and defeat Texas State. 80 Wyoming, a team I'm very disappointed in. After a good Week 1 win at New Mexico State, had a complete letdown against Washington State. Very disappointed in the Cowboys and Craig Bull's team. Instead of maybe 8-4, like I thought before the year, maybe they had more like a 7-5, 6-6 type of season. We might have overrated that defense just a little bit. 79 is Hawaii. Huge surprise at 2-0 right now. They defeated Colorado State on the road, and then they go home and beat Navy. So 2 very good wins to start the season for Hawaii. Their coach was on the hot seat. If they make a bowl game, maybe he'll be off the hot seat and will save his job. So keep an eye on Hawaii. 78 Army. Can't fault them for losing at Duke. Duke's a very good team in the ACC this year. And I think the Black Knights will give opponents a hard time this season. 77 Baylor. A very, very impressive win for them, even though it was against an FCS opponent in Abilene Christian. But all I have to say is that it's better than last year already, because don't forget they lost to Liberty last year in the season opener. And now Liberty's in the FBS. And they won their first game as an FBS member, so maybe things looking a little better for the Baylor Bears. Oh, and certainly for Liberty, too. 76 is the UCLA Bruins, a team that absolutely flopped in Week 1, losing at home to Cincinnati. This is certainly a team that's not making a bowl game. 75 is Texas Tech, who lost in Houston against Ole Miss. I picked Ole Miss in that game. Texas Tech was an undeserving favorite in that game, and I said it at the time last week. But I think Texas Tech's probably headed for like a 3-4-5 win season. Cliff Kingsbury is certainly a coach to watch out for in terms of hot seats. 74 is the Buffalo Bulls. They did what they had to do the other day and defeat Delaware State. Temple waits next week. That's going to be a very interesting game. When I do my picks on Friday, I haven't decided who I'm picking yet, but oof, that's going to be a very hard call. Number 73 is Georgia Tech, a team that beat Alcorn State week 1. They did what they had to do. 72, Arizona State did what they had to do. They defeated UTSA. Big game for them this weekend as they host Michigan State. 71 is Toledo, who did what they had to do and defeat VMI, and they've defeated VMI big. 70, Fresno State, like Toledo, did what they had to do, and that's defeat an FCS opponent, except they defeated Idaho. 69 is Cincinnati. Good win for them at UCLA. Maybe they'll make a bowl game this season. Maybe I underestimated the Bearcats a little bit. After a couple down years, maybe they're back. 60 is Ohio, the favorite in the MAC, who did what they had to do and defeat Howard, even though that game was close. Maybe Howard's a better team than I've given credit for. 67 is Navy. Disappointing loss to Hawaii. Big game for them coming up against Memphis. 66 North Carolina. They lost to Cal. It was a close one, but I expected them to lose that game. 65 Tennessee. Got blown out in Charlotte against West Virginia. Didn't expect Tennessee to do much in that game because I'm high on the Mountaineers. 64 is Kansas State, who did what they had to do and defeat South Dakota. Big game next week for them as the Mississippi State Spartans await. 63 is Syracuse. Good win for them last week against Western Michigan. They did what they had to do. 62 Virginia. They did what they had to do. They defeated Richmond at home. I remember they lost to an FCS team. It might have actually been Richmond a few years ago. It's either Richmond or James Madison. It was one of those in-state FCS schools that they lost to. It was one or the other. 61 Wake Forest. They defeated Tulane in overtime on Friday night, I believe it was. 60 Arkansas did what they had to do and defeat FCS school in, I believe it was Eastern Illinois that they knocked off. And it was. 59 Indiana did what they had to do and beat FIU on the road. 58 Troy, very disappointing loss against Boise State, but I didn't want to punish them that bad. They'll probably be higher than this in a couple of weeks once they get their feet settled. Boise State's just a much better team than Troy. Even though Troy hosted that game, Boise was a double-digit favorite, and they showed why that they deserve to be ranked and a double-digit favorite. I'll get to Boise State in a minute, but I think Troy will be okay. 57 Purdue, disappointing home loss to Northwestern to start the season. 56, perhaps the biggest surprise of week 1 in terms of results of notable games, and that's the Washington State Huskies. Maybe the Huskies are headed for 7-5, 8-4, like some people didn't think was possible. A lot of people thought it was a lock that they would be 500 or worse. But it sure looks like that they'll be a team to be reckoned with in the Pac-12 this season. 55 is Cal. They beat North Carolina. I expected them to do that. 54 is Appalachian State. High ranking for them. They took Penn State to the brink. They arguably should have won that game in Happy Valley. But give Trace McSorley credit. He led the Nittany Lions back in that game. But App State just deserves a ton of credit, and they might be the favorites in the Sun Belt Conference. But you could argue for number 53, and that's Arkansas State. And they did what they had to do, and that was defeat Southeast Missouri State. 52 is San Diego State. They lost to Stanford. No shame in that. I expect them to be competitive all season. 51 is Florida Atlantic, a team that absolutely got the doors ripped off of them in Norman against Oklahoma. I expect FAU to recover from that and win the Conference USA. 50 Houston, who came from behind to defeat Rice. 49 Nebraska didn't play, so I couldn't really judge them. 48 Iowa State, same thing, couldn't play, so I didn't judge them. 47 Louisville, blowout loss to Alabama, but it's Alabama. I expect Louisville to recover. 46 Minnesota defeated New Mexico State. Let's see if they're a factor in the Big Ten this year. 45 is South Florida. Did what they had to do and defeat Elon. Big game for them this weekend as they host Georgia Tech. 44 is NC State. I wasn't all that impressed with the Wolfpack. James Madison hung around in that game, although JMU is one of the better FCS schools. So maybe I have to give JMU more credit than blame for NC State. 43 Maryland, big win over Texas. But Texas could have won that game. In my opinion, they just missed some opportunities. The fact that the game was in Landover certainly helped Maryland's cause. They are probably going to finish better than I expected them to. 42 Arizona, perhaps the biggest disappointment for me this week other than Texas, losing at home to BYU. That's just unacceptable. Khalil Tate and Kevin Sumlin's first game at Arizona, that's just unbelievable. I floored that they lost that game. But maybe they're looking more like a 7-5, 6-6 type of team than what I predicted them to be, and that was 9-3. 41 BYU. Congratulations, great win. Maybe the Cougars are a better team than I expected them to be. 40 Vanderbilt, good win over Middle Tennessee. I predicted them to be a surprise in the SEC this season and make a bowl game. They were the consensus pick to finish last in the East Division. I picked them to finish sixth, and I had Tennessee last. So a good win for Vandy and a step in the right direction towards one of my overs in terms of my over predictions. 39 Memphis, they defeated Mercer. Did what they had to do. 38 Missouri, they did what they had to do, and that's defeat UT Martin. 37 Texas A&M did what they had to do in defeat Northwestern State. Now they have a big game Saturday night as game day comes to town, and so does Clemson. 36 is Kentucky, good win over Central Michigan, and they had to win that game. 35 Florida did what they had to do against Charleston Southern. 34 Colorado beat Colorado State, blew them out, and they were only a 7.5-point favorite. 33 Ole Miss, an impressive win over Texas A&M. Probably a bit of an overreaction ranking right there. But hey, making that game against Alabama next weekend look a darn bit intriguing, and I'll get to another big SEC West game next weekend that I got a hit on. That game day could very well be at come next week. 32 Northwestern, good season opening win over Purdue. It looks like they'll finish above 500 on the year because I think that was a swing game for both of those teams. 31 is Iowa, who won over Northern Illinois. Did what they had to do. 30 Texas. Yes, that's high for a team that just lost to Maryland. But they could have won that game. If Ellinger doesn't throw the interception with less than 2 minutes to go, maybe Texas wins that game. 29 Boston College, impressive win over UMass. 28 Duke, impressive win over Army. 27 Oklahoma State, did what they had to do and defeat Missouri State. 26 South Carolina, did what they had to do, defeat Coastal Carolina. And now how I think the rankings will play out. And this is also my power rankings. So, as I mentioned before, my top 25 on the power rankings is how I feel that the AP poll should be played out. 25, Utah did what they had to do, defeat Weber State. I think their game next week against Washington is going to be telling, as long as Utah gets the W in week 2. And Washington, of course, as well. 24, Florida State, a little bit low for a team that just lost 24-3 against Virginia Tech. And DeAndre Francois did not have a good game. And on the flip side, Justin Jackson had a very good game for Vatech. But Florida State's another team that looks like it's going under its projected win total. They might just be a 6-6 football team. And a big overreaction that you'll probably see, especially if FSU doesn't turn out to be what people think, and I think that's headed in that direction. Was Willie Taggart the right hire? I questioned that hire at the time. He only had one good year at Oregon, and then the really good year at USF too to get this gig. But there were better guys out there for the Seminoles than a guy that had one good year at USF and then one good year at Oregon. But hey, maybe the Noles turn it around and I look like a fool in a couple weeks. 23, Oregon. That's ironic. Good win over Bowling Green, a game that they had to have, took care of business. 22, UCF. Took care of business against UConn. 21, Boise State, an impressive win over Troy. 20, Mississippi State beats Stephen F. Austin. Nick Fitzgerald comes back this week against Kansas State. 19, Miami, terrible loss against LSU. Malik Rozier did not play well. 18, Virginia Tech, that was an impressive win at Doe Campbell in Tallahassee against Florida State. As I mentioned before, Justin Jackson played outstanding. 17, Michigan, disappointing loss against Notre Dame. They are not completely out of the playoff picture yet. They just have to win out. And the same goes for another team I'm going to talk about in a couple seconds. 16, West Virginia took care of business against Tennessee. So not much to evaluate there other than that people are already anointing Will Greer as the early Heisman frontrunner along with Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa. 15, TCU did what they had to do and defeat Southern. 14, LSU, impressive win over Miami. It looks like the Tigers are for real, and I was wrong about the Tigers. If the Tigers have a good season and stay relevant in the sport this year, then Ed Orgeron's job will be safe. And I think that's where it's trending right now. LSU's defense is very, very good. It looks like they found themselves a quarterback too. And 2 weeks from now, they play Auburn, and that looks like a game that Game Day will pick, barring one of those two teams losing this weekend, which I highly doubt. 13, USC did what they had to do against UNLV. 12, Stanford did what they had to do against San Diego State, get the revenge from last year. 11, Michigan State barely survived against Utah State. 10, Penn State barely survived against Appalachian State. Maybe those two teams are worse than we thought, but I just think it was week 1, a blip on the radar. And especially in Penn State's case, I think Appalachian State is much better than we all anticipated. 9 is Washington. It's another team that I think isn't out of the playoff chase yet. They just have to win out, in my opinion, to get a spot. And hey, at least in Washington's case, that was a very, very close game that they could have won. And same could be said for Michigan too. But they just struggled more in that game than Washington did against Auburn. And speaking of Michigan, their opponent from last week is 8, and that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They look like a playoff contender. I picked them to go 11-1 before the season. That looks like a good prediction right now. 7, Oklahoma. Very good win over FAU. Move on to next week. 6, Auburn. Great win over Washington. Got to win next week, and maybe Game Day will be from Baton Rouge when Auburn takes on LSU. 5, Ohio State Buckeyes. Did what they had to do to take care of business against Oregon State. Sans no Urban Meyer, although Meyer's back at practice. 4 is Wisconsin. Did what they had to do against Western Kentucky. 3, Georgia. Did what they had to do against Austin Peay. 2, Clemson. Did what they had to do against Furman. And 1, Alabama. Took care of business against Louisville. Looked like the best team in the country yet again. Tua Tagovailoa. As I mentioned before when I talked about Will Grier, looks like one of the front runners for the Heisman Trophy. And now I'm going to go over the rankings that actually just came out before I get to guess the lines. I'm going to go from 1 to 25 this time, though. 1, Alabama. Good call. 2, Clemson. Good. 3, Georgia. 4 and 5 switched. Ohio State's 4, Wisconsin's 5. I guess because Wisconsin didn't have that great of a first half. Although Ohio State struggled on defense, so I don't get why they're 4 and 5. But they're only 4 points apart, so I can't really complain about it. 6 is Oklahoma. 7, Auburn. 8, Notre Dame. 9, Washington. 10, Stanford. 11, LSU. 12, Virginia Tech. 13, Penn State. 14, West Virginia. 15, Michigan State. Oof, they did not like what they saw from Sparty. 16, TCU. 17, USC. Wow, I'm surprised they dropped. What did USC do wrong? All they did was just defeat UNLV. 18 is Mississippi State. Deserves to stay where they are. I had them a little bit lower, but I had them lower on my projected rankings because of the impressive wins and other losses by other teams that just shuffled around. 19, UCF. Good for them moving up a little bit, but I don't think they should be the highest ranked group of 5 team. 20 is Boise State. That's who I think should be the highest ranked group of 5 team. They're better than UCF. 21, Michigan. Ooh, how far the Wolverines have dropped. 22, Miami. Ooh, how far the Hurricanes dropped. But they did the right thing by putting Michigan ahead of Miami because Notre Dame is better than LSU, period, end of story. Unless if I'm proven wrong somehow. 23, Oregon. They're in the right spot. 24 is South Carolina. Good for them. I had them 26. And my rankings in 25 is the Florida Gators. That's insane that they're ranked. Unbelievable. I think a couple teams here got snubbed. Florida State probably shouldn't be ranked. I had them 24, but I just thought that the poll people were going to keep them in because Florida State usually does get respect. Others receiving votes, Utah, 26, but they really should have been ranked. Well, they would have been 26. But yeah, Utah got votes, Oklahoma State got votes, BC got votes, Texas A&M got votes, Northwestern, Maryland, Ole Miss, NC State, Florida State, Houston, Memphis, Washington State, Iowa State, Hawaii, BYU, Iowa, Kansas State, Fresno State, and Arkansas State also have received votes. Guess the lines time for week 2 of the college football season. Only surprising one game Friday night, and the rest of the games are Saturday. Let's get going with this. TCU is at SMU, and I have TCU laying 16.5, and TCU is laying 21.5. So 5 points off, so I guess they're overreacting to SMU's debacle against North Texas. New Mexico is at Wisconsin. And I have Wisconsin laying 40 points to New Mexico. And Wisconsin is laying 35. I have Michigan laying 37.5 against Western Michigan. And the Wolverines are laying 28 points. So 4 touchdowns. A very interesting game, SEC against the Big 12. 18th ranked Mississippi State at Kansas State. I have the Bulldogs of Mississippi State laying 7.5 points in Manhattan against Bill Snyder's team. And they are laying 9.5. So, a couple points off on that line, as people are betting up the Bulldogs a little bit. I have Towson at Wake Forest. Wake Forest laying 47. That line's not out yet because it's an FCS team in Towson. Purdue hosts Eastern Michigan. I have Purdue laying 15.5 points. Purdue is laying 16. So I was a half point off there. Liberty at Army is a very interesting game. I have Army laying 20 against Liberty. Army's only laying 9.5. The overreaction for Liberty is just incredible. Vanderbilt is hosting Nevada. And I have Vandy laying 10.5 to Nevada. And Vandy is laying 9. So they are trying to get people to take Vandy to win by double digits there. Arizona at Houston. Despite losing last week, I have Arizona laying 3 at Houston. And believe it or not, the Houston Cougars are favored by 4.5. Duke Northwestern. I have Northwestern laying 4.5 to Duke. Northwestern's only laying 3. So I was a 1.5 off with the Wildcats. Georgia Tech at South Florida. I have South Florida laying 2 points against Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's laying 3.5. So I had the wrong team favored there, because I was off by a few points. Georgia State at NC State, I have the Wolfpack laying 12.5 against Georgia State. And NC State is laying a whopping 25.5. So I was way off on that line. UCLA at Oklahoma, I have Oklahoma laying 34 against Chip Kelly's squad. Oklahoma is laying 30, so I was only 4 points off there. Boston College is hosting Holy Cross. I said Boston College by 33.5. Line's not out. Same goes for Virginia Tech hosting William & Mary of Vatech. I should say 12th ranked Vatech, laying 40.5 to William & Mary. Portland State at number 23rd ranked Oregon. I have Oregon laying 55.5. No lines for those because those are FCS teams. Air Force at FAU. I have FAU laying 25.5 points. FAU is laying only 8.5 points. So what a major overreaction to that game against Oklahoma. Kansas at Central Michigan. I have it as, I was originally going to say pick 'em, but I'm going to change my pick and say Central Michigan by 3. And Central Michigan is laying 4.5. So it's only a 1.5 off there. Arkansas State at number 1 Alabama. I have Alabama laying 31.5 to Arkansas State. And Bama is laying 36.5. 3rd ranked Georgia at 24th ranked South Carolina. I have Georgia laying 11.5 in Columbia against South Carolina. And Georgia is laying 10 points on the road. So I was about 1.5 off on that line. That sounds like an appropriate line for that game, now that South Carolina is ranked. Rutgers at Ohio State. I have the Buckeyes laying a whopping 35 on Rutgers, and that is what the Buckeyes are laying. Ball State at Notre Dame. Number 8 ranked Notre Dame, I should say. And I have the Irish laying 37.5 to Ball State. And the Irish is laying 34.5. So it was about 3 points off there. Colorado at Nebraska. Nebraska obviously did not play last week. I have Nebraska laying 7 to Colorado, and Nebraska's laying 5. So I was 2 points off there, as this should be an emotional game for the Cornhuskers. Buffalo at Temple. I have Temple laying 3.5 to the Bulls. And Temple is laying 5 to the Bulls. So, Memphis at Navy. I have Navy laying 5.5 to Memphis. And Memphis is, believe it or not, favored in this game by 6.5. That's crazy. I think they're just overreacting to that ugly performance against Hawaii by Navy and Memphis winning big over an FCS team. That's crazy. All right. North Carolina at East Carolina, I have the Tar Heels laying 7.5 on the road. And the Tar Heels are laying 16.5 to the Pirates. So I was way off on that one. Wagner at Syracuse. I guess Syracuse minus 35. That's not posted. Neither is Kent State Howard. Kent State's obviously hosting Howard. Kent State laying 23.5 is my pick. Morgan State at Akron. Not posted. I have Akron laying 26.5. Lamar at Texas Tech. I picked Texas to lay, or sorry, Texas Tech to lay 40.5. Southern Illinois against Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss laying 45. East Tennessee State against Tennessee. I have Tennessee laying 35.5. North Dakota at 9th ranked Washington. I have Washington laying 47.5. Cyhawk, Iowa State at Iowa. I have the Hawkeyes laying 6.5. And the Hawkeyes are only laying 3.5. So I was 3 points off there. Savannah State at Miami. I have Miami only giving 38 points. Well, I should say number 22 ranked Miami now. Youngstown State at number 14 ranked Mountaineers of West Virginia. I have West Virginia laying 45. That line's not posted yet. SC State at 19th ranked UCF. I have UCF laying 35.5. Those last 3 games I listed are FCS teams. Maryland at Bowling Green's interesting. I have Maryland laying 14.5 against Bowling Green, and Maryland's laying 16.5, so I was 2 points off there. UMass at Georgia Southern. I have Georgia Southern laying 1 point. Georgia Southern is laying 3 points. So I was 2 points off with that line. Appalachian State at Charlotte. I have App State laying 16.5 to Charlotte. And App State is laying 14. So I was actually 2.5 points off with that line. That line is lower than I thought it would be. Eastern Kentucky at Marshall. I have Marshall laying 27.5. That's an FCS team. 2 ranked Clemson against Texas A&M. I have Clemson laying 13.5 in College Station. And Clemson is laying 12.5 in College Station. So I was off with that guess by a point. Southeastern Louisiana at LSU, I have the newly ranked Tigers. The 11th ranked Tigers, I should say, laying 47.5 against Southeastern Louisiana. Line not posted, obviously. because it's FCS. Same with the next one, UT Martin at Middle Tennessee. At Middle Tennessee laying 27.5. Same with the next one. Southern at La Tech. I have La Tech laying 28. UL Monroe at Southern Miss is posted because that's two FBS teams. Southern Miss I have laying 18.5. Southern Miss is laying only 6 points, which I think is crazy. Southern Miss looked really good last week. UAB at Coastal Carolina. I have UAB laying a whopping 15.5 against Coastal Carolina. UAB is laying 10. So I was off a little bit there. Baylor at UTSA. I have the Bears laying 16 against the Roadrunners. And the Bears are laying 14.5. So I was 1.5 points off on that line. Indiana State at Louisville. I have Louisville laying 38.5. Wyoming at Mizzou. I have Mizzou laying a whopping 13.5 to Wyoming. And Mizzou is laying 18 to Wyoming. That's crazy. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction line to the way Wyoming lost to Wazoo last week at home. Texas Southern at Texas State. I have Texas State laying 24.5. Florida A&M at Troy. I have Troy laying 35.5. That line not posted because of the FCS thing. Same goes for the next game. Samford at Florida State. I have Florida State laying 45. Alabama State at 7th ranked Auburn. I have Auburn laying 50.5. Line not posted. Western Illinois at Illinois. I have Illinois minus 32. Virginia at Indiana. I have Indiana laying 17 to Virginia. And Indiana's only laying 7. That prediction was way off by me right there. I probably just overreacted Indiana a little bit and didn't buy Virginia. Arkansas at Colorado State. I have Arkansas minus 10. Arkansas is laying 13, so I was 3 points off there. That's an interesting game. Kentucky at 25 ranked Florida, the undeserving ranked Gators. And I have the Gators laying only 7.5. And the Gators are laying 14. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. Kentucky deserves a little bit more respect, in my opinion. The snubbed team that should have been ranked, the Utah Utes, at Northern Illinois, I have Utah laying 10.5. At Northern Illinois, Utah is laying 11. Maine at Western Kentucky, I have Western Kentucky laying 35.5. FIU at Old Dominion, I have Old Dominion laying 8.5. And believe it or not, FIU in Old Dominion is at a pick'em, which I think is crazy. I think they're overrating FIU a lot and underestimating Old Dominion a little bit. Incarnate Word at North Texas. I have North Texas laying 35.5. Fresno at Minnesota. I have Minnesota laying 9. And Minnesota is laying only 2.5. I think that's ridiculous. 13th ranked Penn State at Pitt. I have Penn State laying 17.5 at Pitt. Penn State is only laying 8.5 at Pitt. A little bit of an overreaction line right there, as Penn State, dare I say, looks to bounce back after a near upset over Appalachian State. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction line right there. Tulsa, Texas, I have the Longhorns laying 20.5. And the Longhorns are laying 22. So I was 1.5 points off on that line. New Mexico State at Utah State, I have Utah State laying 13.5. Utah State is laying 24 points. That's incredible. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction, too, because of how good Utah State looked against Sparty and how terrible New Mexico State has been. South Alabama at Oklahoma State, I have the Cowboys laying 27.5. And the Cowboys are laying 32. So I was 4.5 points off right there. Nichols, fresh off an upset of Kansas, is at Tulane. I have Tulane laying 30.5. That line's not posted. Neither is Southern Utah at Oregon State. I have the Beavers laying 27. Cincinnati at Miami of Ohio is posted. I have Cincinnati laying 1 point at Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio is actually laying 1.5 points. I can see that because they're home. Maybe they expect a little bit of a letdown from the Badgers. The teams that I thought were snubbed of game day, number 17th ranked USC and number 10 ranked Stanford. I have Stanford laying 7.5. The Cardinals are laying only 4.5. So I was 3 points off on that line. UTEP at UNLV. I have UNLV laying 25.5 points. UNLV is laying 23.5, which I was 2 points off on that line, so not bad for me. Sacramento State at San Diego State, I have San Diego State laying 30.5. That line's not posted, obviously. Cal at BYU, I have Cal -3 at BYU. And that's going to be a fun game now because both these teams are 1-0. And BYU is actually laying 3.5. So I was just about 6.5 points off on that line. Connecticut at number 20 ranked Boise State. I have Boise State laying a whopping 38.5 to UConn. And Boise is laying 31 to UConn. So I was a little off on that line. I thought Boise was giving a touchdown more. Only 3 more games left to go. Michigan State at Arizona State. I think the new 15th ranked team in the country will be laying 10.5 at Arizona State. They're only laying 6.5, which is absolutely crazy. I think it's a bit of an overreaction. San Jose State at Wazoo. I have Wazoo laying 35.5. And Wazoo is laying 34, so I was 1.5 points off there. And last but not least, Rice at Hawaii. I have Hawaii laying 28 points. Hawaii's laying 17.5, so I think that line is a little bit low. That's it for Guess the Lines, and that's it for today's podcast. I'll obviously be back tomorrow recapping all the baseball. U.S. Open. I'll also be doing WNBA recaps. I'll be doing the NHL TV announcer rankings. And I'll discuss anything else that goes on in the world of sports. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.